Right. A very great evening once more. Good evening and welcome to Youth for Climate Debates. My name is Okoth Opondo, and proudly tonight I'll be moderating this great debate without my co-host because of challenges that could not be dealt with on time. So, as usual, remember we promised to bring you some of the best debates here for a period of 4 days, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So, today being the third day, the 22nd day of September, we are bringing these debates once more. And remember, every day we've covered different topics. Yes, and in case you've missed all those debates, in case you missed any of them, you can always go back and check on the Climate Story Lab Africa, Facebook page, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. You can also check them on the Camp D Voices Facebook page, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube, because all the debates are archived in the space that I've mentioned. We are here because it is very important for us to be here. Wonderful. Yes, welcome you once more to this great debate that for the past 2 days now, this being the third day and tomorrow the fourth day, we've brought you some of the best debates here on climate communication, food security, green energy for Africa, and the issue of climate and politics. Yes, I just said climate and politics because it is very important that we even get to know where is the African politician in this whole conversation. But tonight, it is climate change and energy. Together with our great partners, Climate Story Lab Africa, in collaboration with ourselves here, Camp D Voices, supported by the Climate Justice Resilience Fund and DocuVox, we invite you to share your experience and your thoughts, and even your insights on matters climate change. Here, we can guarantee you that your voice matters because every discussion that is held here is escalated to the places that I need to get to. So for the next few days, still expect to hear more of this. We are saying that as young people, we need climate action that speaks to our hearts. We need climate action that speaks to a prosperous and dignified future. We are glad you are here and welcome once more to this great debate. Yes, for those who are still joining us and those able to share the link with others, please do share the link. I'll be asking my director just on the other side to share the link that can just be posted on your status, on your Facebook pages and your story. Tell everyone that we are live and we are on, and this conversation needs to get where it needs to get to, because this one must be done. Not today, not tomorrow, but we have to keep having these conversations again and again and again. So ladies and gentlemen, this debate is coming to at a very interesting time. If you are living in the Republic of Kenya, you know definitely what is happening. Matters energy. When you talk of gas, you talk of people using firewood, you talk of people using charcoal, you talk of fuel, because we depend on fuel, on production, on means of transport and everything. When you talk of that, these are issues which are so close to the hearts of the people. And we know definitely the moment any price, any increase down the price of any, you are affecting production, you are affecting everything that is happening around. So tonight, the topic of concentration is climate change and energy here in Africa. Yes, yesterday we were here talking about climate change and food security, and we managed to get some very interesting insights. The day before, we were talking about climate change communication, and some of the things that we're about to talk about, today were mentioned on day one, were mentioned yesterday. People talked about food security being one of the major priorities, to the point that one of the questions that we're asking ourselves is food security then more important, a war to fight, than climate change itself? We'll be hearing from other people maybe on what their take was on this, but shortly before we get into that, also just to take you through some maybe quick things to do around. There's the question and answer segment. You can get an opportunity. You have the opportunity to drop your question in the Q&A section. Write down your question, put down your comment, and it will be read, or we'll invite you to the screen to read what you think, what your thoughts are. You can also just keep on sharing your thoughts and your ideas also on the chat box. We have people working in the background to make sure that all this is coming to you straight away. And before we get into that, let's just go straight away into a video that will definitely help us understand what we are talking about here. In case there are people talking about the matters we are talking about here, in case there are people working around these spaces. My director, you can play for us the video.
Kijiji yenye hakuna stima ama kwenye hakuna maendeleo, huaga giza inaingia mbele ya kwenye kuna stima. Percentage kubwa even today unakuta mpaka simu hawana. Kwa nini? Juu stima hana. So unakuta ya kwamba live yenye anakaa, live yake iko nyuma sana, ni kama zile siku za enzi. Kupata stima ilikuwa ngumu sana. My old brother akienda kazini kutoka kwetu university mpaka kwa barabara, mimi nilikuwa namsukumia baisikeli mpaka pale. Akianzia kuride ilikuwa masaa ya 1:30, nikaona ya kwamba inatoa mwangaza. So kutoka hapo fikira zangu zikaona ya kwamba to solve the problem yenye iko kwa community, inabidi nitumie plan B ya baisikeli, niende ningoe ile dynamo ya baisikeli, nipeleke kwa mto, nione kama naweza pata stima. Ile maji tu inamwagika pale inarudi kwa mto. So nikaonelea kwamba ile dynamo haiwezi toza kijiji yenye iko pale. So nikaanzia kufikiria kwamba nitatoa generator kubwa wapi. Jamaa mmoja hapo kwa kijiji ndiye tulikutana naye kwa mtu, akaniuliza, "Bona nimekuona hapa mara kadhaa na bado ni kama hujaifaulu." Kamwambia hata hii mambo ya stima nataka kuachana nayo. Akaniambia kwamba mwenye alitest bulb mpaka iwake alijaribu mara 99 ili hiyo bulb iwake, na mpaka wa leo haijai waka vyenye yeye waga anataka iwake. Nikaona inabidi nifikirie. So nikapata jamaa mwenye alikuwa na generator, nikaenda nikaibai 3500. So kitu yenye ilikuwa ni nani atakuwa ananunua mafuta ya kuweka hii generator ili ipate stima. Kazi ya pili ilikuwa kurudi kwa mto, alafu nirudi nyumbani niende nibomoe ile generator. Juu pesa ya mafuta sitakuwa napata. So after kubomoa nikatumia some part of the bicycle kama rim yenye ilikuwa inazunguzwa na turbine. After that hiyo wheel inazunguza sasa ile generator yenye niko nayo. After that sasa kuangalia kwa reading nikaona ina generator around 240 volts. But right now we are talking about 820 wenye saa hii tumeconnect house. The total of the people that they are using Magiro Power ni kama 3000 hivyo wenye wanafurahia stima ya Magiro Power. So after that kwa kuja watu wa environment kwa shule wakasema kuna kijana anaonekana kwa TV amefanya hivi na hivi. And after that Magiro Power ikapik. Mpaka nikasema kwamba inafaa kuregister Magiro Hydro Power, because that is my name Magiro, to be registered as Magiro Hydro Power. So from that time kwa kuja watu wengi sana wa environment, tunashidana tunaangalia ni project gani huwa inasaidia mazingira. I have been allowed more than 10 to 14 certificates in Africa and also in the world. Juu hapa Murang'a tuko na force, tuko na mito kubwa zenye ziko hapa. For zenye ziko hapa you can even generate maybe 50 megawatts zenye ziko hapa karibu. Kitu yenye niliona ya kwamba ni kwanza kuchange to transform the community from wenye wako hapa tuanzie na hapa. Na ni nini tuko nayo? Tunataka kila Mkenya, hakuna time yenye atakuwa anasema ati stima zinakuaga za matajiri. So kila mtu atakuwa anafurahia. Juu hiyo maji tu inakuja inapita kwa mto inarudi. Na hakuna kitu inasaidia. Inafaa kuwa imefanya kazi before ifike Indian Ocean. Juu tukisema tunahitaji maybe tuungane watu wenye wako hapa ili tuende Kenya Power kwenye iko, hatutafika huko. Tutakuwa bado tunasema 10 years to come, 20 years to come. Hiyo 20 years to come ikifika nitakuwa umri yangu iko juu hata naenda retire. So nitakuwa nasema Nimeona stima, but nimeona stima time yenye nakaribia kuondoka kwa hii dunia. Mbona usifurahie time yenye uko young kwa hii dunia?
Wonderful. What a great video there by Magiro, because Magiro says he chose to register Magiro Hydropower because the one who came up with the whole idea to at least address a solution, to address a problem by providing the necessary solution in his home area. And indeed, Jeremy Atambo said that is such a captivating story, and probably also just be getting to the debaters later just to get a quick reaction to the video. So in the meantime, let me just take it very quick to introduce the debaters that we are having in the room. I told you earlier, tonight, the debate, I'll be moderating it alone because one of the people supposed to be in the panel here also acts as the co-moderator. Liz Mwangi is not able to join us because of the same issues we are talking about here. She's in the dark. You know, the challenges of power in Nairobi. If you've lived in this city, you know what is happening around. So straight into the debaters, we have 4 young, amazing debaters. They are students in, actually all of them are students in various universities in Kenya and also in Rwanda. So the first debater that I would like to introduce is called John Gatheru. John Gatheru is a student studying the international relations at Strathmore University here in Nairobi, Republic of Kenya. We have the second speaker, Maria Gitau. Maria Gitau is also another student studying at Strathmore University. They'll be telling us shortly more about themselves. Then we have Jeremy Atambo, a student studying international relations at Daystar University, but also an environmental champion. And finally, we have Eugene Kwizera. Eugene Kwizera studying in African Leadership University, that is in Kigali, Rwanda. Still in East Africa. So all the 4 debaters are here already with us. And before even we jump into any question, I want to give you people this opportunity just to briefly tell us something about yourself and why you are in this debate before striking the first question. And also when you're taking that opportunity to say that, please kindly also just give a quick reaction to the video. May I start with Eugene Kwizera, joining us from Rwanda?
Thank you, Opondo. So generally, like he has said, I'm Eugene Kwizera. I'm a student at the African Leadership University in Kigali, Rwanda. In Kigali, I'm studying international business and trade. But prior to that, I was a student at Starehe in Kenya and Kinyanjiro Primary School in Kenya, where I grew up as an immigrant, a legal immigrant. And from there is where I think my first interaction with climate change was in Kenya when I did a competition for climate change essay writing competition that was organized by Carefree and the Ministry of Environment. And at that time, for me, I was just competing. And wrote something as I saw the environment and climate change issues. But later in life, like for example, right now, as you grow up and you start to pay certain bills and you see how they correlate to the changes in climate, how they correlate to different issues like energy. Right now, fuel, the amount of money you spend for you to move from one place to another is determined by energy, whose future and whose prices are also determined by the current situation with the climate change. So then it started becoming more and more a reality to me. And even in my venture pursuits now, each and everything, I try to work in areas that are trying to promote solutions that drive towards sustainability, whether be it in energy, agriculture, or anywhere, but in products or in companies that have the climate change issue in mind, so that when you're working with them, you know that you're working with people who in future, they're thinking about your future and the future of the planet, that's sustainability. Thank you.
Wonderful, Eugene. May I now go to Jeremy Atambo?
Okay, very well. So thank you so much. My name is Jeremy Atambo. Combo. I am a student in Strathmore University, currently pursuing ACCA, and also a student in Daystar University, currently pursuing international relations, security, peace, and development. And I'm quite excited to be here. I think my first experience with the environment and climate as a whole began in class 4. When I was taken to a trip for a trip to Gigiri UN, and there we had an interaction session for World Environmental Day. That is on the June 5th, and we had quite a bit of time. And I think that's when I realized that's what I want to do, and that's what I want to pursue in my life. So I took study in 3 fields, mainly conservation of the environment, biodiversity, biological changes, and mutation. And I'm looking forward to these debates today. So thank you so much. That's it for me.
Wonderful. I'm waiting to see anyone who will react to the video that we just watched. Jeremy, would you like to react to the video very fast, maybe in a few seconds before I call in the next speaker?
Yes, I would. That story really touched me, because in the beginning you saw that the village had no lights, and it just took a young man with an idea and an initiative. And he even mentioned that he gave up a couple of times before he was told not to give up, and just go and pursue his interest. And he's helped his village in the long run. And I think if you can just start from within, you can break the barriers and now spread outward. So it was a very captivating story for me. Thank you so much.
Okay, and may I also request that all the debaters, your videos should remain on all through the debate until we are done with the debate, because it is very important. John Gadero, turn on your video and your audio, and you are the next speaker. John Gadero. Okay, John Gadero.
Hi. You don't need to forgive me, I'm not in the right place, but I can talk.
Okay. Maria, go first, as then we come back to John.
Okay. First, thank you so much for this opportunity to the organizing team, and thank you everyone for being here. My name is Maria Gital. I'm a third-year student pursuing a Bachelor of Science in Informatics and Computer Science at Strathmore University. I think I first got interested not just in energy, but different sectors when I decided to go into the tech field. And in particular, I'm passionate about how my own tech skills can be implemented in order to make changes to certain things in the society, including when it comes to climate change. And one of the ways I do that is I try, even just with my school projects, to incorporate what I've learned and what I'm trying to implement, the ideas I'm trying to work around, into what is currently happening in our communities, and how can tech bring about a change in what we're seeing in our everyday lives. And so, I think one of the things that really stood out for me from the video we've just watched is how Magiro was able to, again, come up with an idea. He looked for a problem in his locality, and he started small, using the skills that he had in order to now make such a huge impact. And so for me, that's what I strive to do, even in my future career, is what skills do I have? What small impact can I start? And then slowly we can see tangible change in our society. So I look forward to this debate. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Maria. John Gadero, are you there? John Gadero is left or is here. We can't see on the panel, but anyway, that is fine. So we now just want to go straight into the conversation that we are having tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, in case you are joining us for the first time, let me just remind you that these are the debates that we've been having, the debate, Youth for Climate Debates. We are use that hashtag on Twitter, use that hashtag on Instagram, and even on Facebook. Keep chatting about it, because this is just the beginning, not the end, because the talks about climate change are talks that cannot be done within one day. On Monday, we were here talking about climate change communication, just trying to understand what young people understand by climate change based on the things that they do every day. On Tuesday, yesterday, the 21st day of September, we were here once again talking about climate change and food security. And tonight, climate change and energy is the talk of the city. That is what we want to talk about today. Now, based on your daily experiences, where you come from, where you go to school, to the churches you visit, the hospitals you go to, what are the most common sources of energy, and how do these sources of energy affect our climate? That's the question that we're tackling tonight. Remember, this conversation is not limited to the debaters on stage alone. You in the virtual hall, you can join us in this conversation. Keep sending your messages in the keep sending your questions in the Q&A section, but you can also keep chatting amongst yourselves here in the chat box. You can also chat with us on YouTube, on Facebook, and on Twitter. Let's make this conversation big. And also remember the Zoom link, in case someone wants to join us still and they're still running late, share the link with anyone that can access the link. Even if they like joining the session and listening while they're traveling back home, you can do so, because that is the most important thing that we are having tonight. So the first question of the day, where each speaker will have 2 minutes to address: what are the most common sources of energy, and how do these sources of energy affect our climate? That's the question that we are going to tackle in this first round. May I start with Maria Gitau, being the only lady in the panel tonight?
All right, so when it comes to the question of what are the most common sources of energy based on our daily life experiences, I decided under the 3 categories of fossil fuels, being oil, coal, and natural gas, to give just a few examples under these. So under oil, mostly you'll hear fuel from cars, yeah? So all of us move from point A to point B. These cars consume fuel. This petrol or this fuel emits gas once burnt, yeah? And then we have charcoal. So in Kenya, for example, when people are going home, you'll see your local the maize people who roast maize will be using charcoal to roast it. You'll find there are people in their houses who cook using charcoal. All of this emits CO2 into our environment. And finally, natural gas. So once you consume food, usually natural gas occurs because of decomposing animal or plant waste. And so the waste that you throw away doesn't disappear once it's been thrown into the dustbin. There's actually a natural process that occurs and emits fossil fuels into our environment. And the reason that we use these so often and so frequently is because they are easy to use. They're an easy alternative. They're easily accessible. They're usually, quote unquote, the cheapest option when it comes to people's pockets, because they're not having to go the extra mile. And so that's why you find they're very widely used, yeah? And so you find, for example, our matatus, which are the local transportation vehicles, even though they, you'll find even on their roads, they're emitting such discolored air from their exhaust pipes, you find people will still use them. We are not seeing people protesting them because they're cheap to use, they're efficient, they're getting you from point A to point B, so I can ignore the smoke and the fumes for a day. But what we don't realize is these emissions actually affect us, and especially when it comes to air pollution. So you find that over the years, the rates of people who are having respiratory diseases has gone up. You'll find a lot of students, for example, who use kerosene lamps when they're studying. They have eye problems because of the, again, the fumes produced. You find people who cook with these fossil fuels, so like the charcoals and even the dung. You find, again, respiratory issues, eye problems. So the air pollution is actually really affecting us in our daily lives. And this then becomes a problem that we, again, need to address. So yeah, I don't think I'll go into too much for now, but I'll just focus on those, yeah.
Great. That is Maria. Maria, asante sana for starting us off on a very high note. Eugene Kwizera from the Africa Leadership University.
Thank you. I think she has said a good bulk of it, of what the daily life, because we all kind of live the same lives each and every day. We partake in most of the same activities. And for me, generally, when I look at how I contribute to this whole issue of climate change and what happens in my everyday life, I'd like to look at it in, say, three ways. There's the activities that I do, then there's the fuel or this energy, the energy relation to it that fuels those activities that I do, and the final impact that these activities usually have on us. Because it's usually very easy for people to just look at it like you know, they're just burning charcoal, they're just burning, you know, they're burning fossil fuels, they are using all these diesel engines and it's ruining the environment. But we forget a little bit to focus more on the activities that we do with these fossil fuels, because that's where the biggest contradiction usually is. In as much as we know all those health hazards, some child in the normal slums of Kibera, Mathare, and all there, they have to study, they have to use that kerosene lamp for them to study, which affects their eyes, but again, at the end of the day, they have to use it, and that will also contribute to how their environment in that whole area is messed up. But these activities each and every day, I don't think we usually look at them close enough to see the impact and the relation they have with energy, so that even when we talk about them or do something about them, we do with the same motivation. So generally in my daily life, there's transport. When you move from one place to another, there's food consumption, like the previous panelist mentioned, you know, when the food that you eat, the way it was prepared, the disposal of that food. There's, if you eat food in a plastic and drop it there, it will not, you know, it will not be good to the environment, and that has a ripple effect on how it will affect the future. So in our daily lives, we do all these activities that seem necessary, that seem so necessary and important, but I feel like even I myself have not always been giving them that due importance until actually you see how they affect you, or you are even in a privileged position to, for example, get knowledge to know how you can contribute to this, to know that actually, for example, you have a choice when you're buying products to buy products that are recyclable, that can be recycled, to buy products that they are biodegradable, to buy products that were produced using means that are environment friendly, and therefore helping reduce the climate change effects. So in each and every day, I think when we focus on, for me, these activities that we do every day, when you focus with them, relating them to the bigger picture, like I've been trying to do in the better part of my adult life. I used to laugh at Greta Thunberg when she was saying, I'll not be flying to, I don't remember which city it was, because I don't want to contribute to the, you know, carbon emissions produced by plane. And I was like, but you need to move. And she used a boat that was, you know, clean energy, and went to all that place. And it started hitting me like, when we look at it as something that it's impossible for us to implement in our daily lives and contribute to this, then we are sort of putting a blockade. But when we look at the options that we have and start acting them on each and every day of our lives, we'll realize that we'll start slowly to reduce these impacts. Because, for example, when we start learning that there's alternatives to energy, you know, like there's this creative way they use the
just a moment, because we will be coming to that. Don't worry, we'll be coming to that. Let me bring in Jeremy Atambo. Jeremy Atambo, Eugene has mentioned a very interesting point that yes, kerosene may be the problem, but at that given point, that kid needs light to study, and there's no other source of light. Which one comes first, this need or the health?
Well, that's a very controversial topic, but maybe you'll allow me to take a third eye lens on these matters. Okay. So when I walk outside my gate, there's a soko, there's a marketplace, and I usually see this mzee. He sells charcoal, and he told me when I went to speak to him that he's been selling charcoal for over 25 years. Why? Because it's inexpensive and it's one of the most commonly used sources of energy in Kenya. I'd take another example and talk about the rural places, the firewood. So many people pick dead branches and twigs. Why again? Because it's cost efficient. Now, another more modern example is Ubers. Ubers have now embraced the use of LPG, which is also commonly known as liquid petroleum gas. Again, why? Because one, it's cost efficient. Two, it reduces air pollution such as smog and exhaust fumes in the air. And now oil in form of petroleum and diesel that is now used to run motor vehicles and generators. The only problem with this is now the pollution that's produced by the exhausts in these vehicles. We have also natural gas, which we don't use as often. But there is great need to find alternative sources of energy. That's a personal belief. And why is it a necessity? Because one, our use and production of energy has had a massive impact on the climate, and the converse is relatively true. So about 2/3 of the global greenhouse gases and emissions are actually linked to burning these fossil fuels for energy that is used in our houses for heating, that is used in our houses for electricity, that is used in our houses for transport and various industries. Additionally, when these fossil fuels, they're burned, they release a large amount of carbon dioxide, that's carbon dioxide, which is a greenhouse gas, obviously. And this greenhouse gas is now trapped heat in the atmosphere, increasing the global temperatures from a rate of 1 to 1.5 in the past, let's say, 30 years. And it's a concerning issue, that is out of question. And personally, I believe in order to reduce global warming, we must all come back to the drawing board and find an amicable solution to reduce these carbon emissions and footprints, and just transition to suitable and cleaner sources of energy. So just before I end, I want to give 2 case studies and the impact of these day-to-day, these small uses of energy, the carbon one. So there are about 300,000 residents of Owino Uhuru in Mombasa County. And they are still ailing. Some of them are still ailing up to date. This was a case study of about 2010. They're ailing from lead and mercury poisoning. And these citizens were awarded 1.3 billion by the Mombasa court because there was a battery manufacturing station that was set up around there for about 5 years. But you see, money is not more valuable than good health or healthy living. This cause was established to be now the battery refining factory that was just proximal to the estate, less than a kilometer away. And you see, when lead, mercury, iron, and arsenic, there's a certain element called arsenic, when they build up in the body, they lead to chronic health problems such as cancer and others, which will definitely and ultimately lead to death. Secondly, there are more and more children that are born with asthma or they contract pneumonic related infections at an early age. Some of the most common diseases caused by air pollution include ischemic heart disease, there's stroke, there's chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. The lungs are also called COPD, and there's also lung cancer and the acute, now lower respiratory infections. And now furthermore, this particulate air pollution has been linked with strokes, and this occurs when the blood supply to the brain is cut off. So just allow me to backtrack to the inclusivity that I had brought up earlier. Even as we champion for cleaner energy, Opondo and team, I'm left puzzled, as I believe that it is rather imperative to have all levels of society on the decision-making table. So we can't just say, oh, use this energy, it's cleaner. What if I can't afford it? Take for instance, the common Mananchi or the Wanjiku, specifically those in rural settlements who pick up twigs, look for big logs to cook, to heat water for drinking. And they can't find an alternative source of fuel, even LPG or electricity or biomethane, because it's first expensive to acquire and expensive to set up. So when it comes to decision making, I'd love to employ a certain strategy, which of course I'll talk about later. This is a strategy of Nigel Topping. He's a current UN Global Environmental Champion, and I'd specifically love to touch on his 3 rules for zero carbon future. He strives for the Race to Zero campaign. So just to put it, let me just mention the Race to Zero as I end. The Race to Zero is a global campaign that is used to rally leadership and support from businesses, local businesses, various cities, regions, investors, for a resilient and healthy zero carbon recovery that prevents future threats. It creates decent jobs, and it unlocks and ensures inclusive and sustainable growth. So that's all I have to say to the first question, but thank you so much.
Wonderful, and I see also some great chat going on here in the chat box. Keep sending the messages in. I will be picking the questions later, but also remember that today, all the members of the audience, those in the audience, those in the virtual hall here, you also have an opportunity to bring in your voices after every question. So should you feel that there's something that you want to contribute to the first question that we are addressing, raise your hand. Use that raise hand button. Just raise your hand straight away. I'll pick you and bring you here. But please, when you are brought to the screen, use less than a minute, 60 seconds at most. The question we're tackling in round one is, what are the common sources of energy that we use in our homes, in our schools, in the places where we are, and how do they affect our climate? Maria, Atambo has mentioned something that again is also quite interesting here, that in as much as, yes, we are leading this one, we are saying, you know, this is what the direction that we want us to take, green energy, to move the direction of the renewable source of energy. But the question is also affordability. Do you believe it is about affordability or maybe lack of will? Are we willing really to take that direction, or is it an issue of affordability, Maria?
Thank you. So it's an intricate question, but I will say that to begin with, I think affordability over the years has become more of an excuse, because I think I'll touch on it a bit later, but you find solutions such as M-Copper, for example, which provide solar lamps to people in rural areas. And what they say is, we're gonna give you an affordable payment plan. Yeah, so if you can afford to pay 20 shillings every 2 weeks for X number of months, we will give you this product, which can cost 500, 1,000, 2,000 Kenya shillings, and slowly you can pay for it. So I don't think affordability is the key issue. Neither do I think it's lack of will. I think to begin with, it's the lack of appropriate access to information. And then that is tied to also, and I will get into this later, but also how as a country and as a community of people, it's something we haven't adopted as something we need. And so because it's not a necessity, we don't mind, like we hear issues of climate change, we hear issues of pollution, but it's like, there's a bit of a culture of it's not really our problem. So we're not really owning the problem. And so you're not finding there's actually the drive when such innovations actually come and are implemented in our communities. We are not seeing then the people owning this as something we need and something we need to make more widespread. So I will say also, even as we talk about innovations in terms of renewable energy and making sure this is accessible to the people, these innovations are also driven by market forces, yeah, demand and supply. So the more people who demand it, the more we will see different innovations coming up in terms of how can we make sure everybody has access, yes? So you'll find that if we look at a parallel industry, say the mobile phones, for example, when smartphones were first introduced, they weren't really targeting everyone, yeah? They were considered something quote unquote for the rich. Over years, people saw this is something that's so widely demanded that to date you can find mobile phones from the highest price point to a price point that's quote unquote common wananchi can afford. Same to energy and electricity. You also heard in the video that Magiro said he wants to actually foster a culture where we are not seeing electricity as something for the people, for people who are rich, yeah? And so what that does is now you find people coming out and coming up with innovative solutions that are tailored to their community, that their community can adapt, and that's affordable and accessible for the members of their community. But that directly ties into people have to see that this is a necessity for us, this is something we need. And so when solutions come up, we are actually readily accepting them and implementing them in our day-to-day lives. That way, the topic of discussion shifts from affordability and becomes what can we do in our personal decisions to implement solutions that are now here for us. Yes, that's what I'd say.
Okay, great. I'll also ask my direction on the other side kindly to help me bring Ali on the screen, because Ali is sending some very interesting messages here. Ali is talking about wind, talking about solar, And all this, because that's now where we are heading with our next question. But he has also sent some very insightful messages here, and how I wish Ali can come on the screen. Ali, if he can be brought on the screen just to share his thought on what he thinks about this question that we are talking about here. The question on the common sources, the sources that we are using for our sources of energy, and how these sources of energy are affecting our climate, whether it's directly or indirectly. I don't know whether Ali can be brought on the screen kindly, so that we have him share his own thoughts here with us. Yes, Ali. Ali, you're on the screen, kindly. Ali, in a minute. Right, in a minute, because I see you. Great, you can just unmute and share your thoughts, Ali. Ali, you can unmute. Unmute your mic.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, you can hear very well, Ali.
All right, no, thank you so much if you can hear me.
Yes,
yeah,
great.
no.
Yes, go ahead.
You can go ahead. Yeah, actually, what I was just trying to emphasize here, it was that the issue of like energy, inequality in terms of the consumption, it actually, it contributes both to the direct and also the indirect distribution in terms of the benefits of the result of energy usage. The thing is that, when we are talking about energy, I want you guys to understand something very quickly. Energy is very much expensive, especially, I'm not sure about your side, but on our side, it's very much expensive, but indirectly proportionally, there are people who are actually using wood in order for them actually, to make sure that they cut the consumption of electricity by buying electricity. What I wanted to emphasize actually is that we need to teach a lot of our African brothers and sisters to make sure that they use the likes of solar, the likes of maybe getting woods from the mountains in order for them to, to avoid the other things. That's what I actually wanted to emphasize. Not sure if you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you very well, Ali. Thank you, Ali, for that. I just felt it was okay for Ali to come and share, because I saw he wrote some very insightful messages there. So great. Now to the next round of the question that we are going to handle, and by the way, just feel free to share. Don't really go on with the quoting books and those big documents that we've been reading around. We just want this conversation to come from where you live, the places where you spend most of your time. And looking at Africa today, with all these several sources of renewable energy, we are talking of, there are quite a number. And the question has always been, is Africa really using what it has to the fullest? Look at the question that we're tackling right now. Africa rich in all the the sources of renewable energy, but we still see people in Nairobi living in the dark sometimes. We still see people in, I don't know whether that happens in Kigali, but I know it happens in different parts of, in the major cities across the continent of Africa. You look at the sun that we have, people, we are blessed. Look at the wind that we have, we are very blessed. Are we really still justified to keep on living the way we are living with these other sources of energy that we are talking about, if we are truly in the race to zero, if we are truly in the race to eradicating some of the diseases which are caused by the sources of energy that we are talking about, if we are truly in the race to adapting with the new world where we are able to use what we have very well, and then also even protect the future of this great climate. Eugene Kwizera.
I think before I answer even that question on the blessings that Africa has in terms of renewable sources and what it should be doing and what it's not maybe doing, I think to better answer it, I'd have to go back to what Maria said. There's one thing she said that was important about the economics of the energy and climate change issue too. There's the issue of supply and demand, whereby if, for example, in that village, that person who's using the wrong means to get light, the wrong means for them to get energy to cook, it's mostly you find that they demand light, they demand energy to cook and all that, but the supply, the things that are being supplied for them to use the things that are being supplied for them to use that are there in the market, there are all these sources of energy that are harmful and they're not contributing to the climate change initiatives to change that. So you find that they are also, in as much as one may have the will or may even have the knowledge, the market of what governments, companies, or I hate to drag this to that side, but capitalism, what capitalism has provided for people is that it has to some extent boxed them in a situation whereby this is all they have to use. And therefore they will go to the, even though knowing there's a better means, but accessing and going to do that better means is not only, it's not about being expensive. I agree with Ali. It's not expensive at all. Actually, energy is, it's not, it's not expensive for them to go to the alternatives. The non-renewable energy sources, they're the ones that are expensive, but the convenience that you have these sources available to you and that's what you'll go for, that's what leads most people to actually use the wrong means of energy production, because that's what has been supplied to them. And I can take the example of countries like Nigeria, blessed with resources and all that, but they're not channeling them to solving the future problem that will come with energy in terms of sources of renewable energy. You find that they have power cuts. They have power cuts each and every day to motivate people to buy generators so that their oil may have market. You find that each and every Nigerian has a generator at their home because the electricity from the hydroelectricity is not like, it's not dependable. Therefore, most people buy generators, and generators will use this diesel and these oils to be able to generate energy for them. So you find that what has been supplied to them by the country or by the industries that are responsible for supplying energy, they've been boxed into this situation where they can't really even initiate that personal thought to go for the alternatives. And when it comes to Africa, it's quite sad that we have, for example, like you mentioned, we have the strongest winds, we have the strongest sunlight for most of our year compared to many other continents, or even per individual country compared to many other countries. But you find that people, you find that you are not making use of this, which again asks or begs the question, as we deal with climate change in relation to energy, should the solution be driven from a bottom-up approach or top-down? Is it that I, as Eugene Kwizera, will have to make a decision each and every day of how I contribute to climate change, or the people up there in charge, the people who supply energy, the people who make policies, they should actually drive solutions and policies to discourage the companies that, for example, supply the energy sources that are harmful to the environment. They should discourage them by taxes. They should discourage them by all sorts of ways, so that at least even if I'm willing or I want to contribute to that climate change initiative, I actually have options that are convenient for me to access. And like right now in the current situation, whereby if I want renewable sources to access, yes, they are cheaper, but it's not convenient. Instead of me going to, for example, find Mkopa and all that, yet to go call Safari, just let's look at it from an individual perspective, where if I wanted to use Mkopa instead of using the kerosene lamp right now, I'll have to call Safaricom, buy credit, call Safaricom, ask them, or call the Mkopa company, ask them, can you come install this for me? We make the agreements, I wait, they put me on their waiting list, if any, or they come even the next day and start, so that I can have that installed. While as humans, we want the easy way out, or I'll just walk outside like 5-7 steps, buy kerosene, come put in my lamp, light it up and do my work. You see, the convenience in accessing this, which also might be as a result of lack of information, is also as a reason as to why I believe Africans are not like acting on it that much. The convenience of access to renewable sources of energy.
Great. So it's also about the convenience of access to renewable energy. Professor Weshuli, just prepare. I'll be bringing you on the screen to share what you're talking about, a better part of our rural Kenya, or rural parts of most African nations, depending on firewood and charcoal. But in the meantime, Jeremy Atambo, your take on this question, brother.
Okay, well, I cannot help but just rebut what Eugene has said. about the learning curve. You know, with any transition, it takes time and commitment. And one example I'd give later on is setting exponential goals. These exponential goals just help guide us to have a smoother transition. And let me just give an example of what I mean. You know, initially, the cost of technology, like any other thing to be adapted or adopted, is rather expensive. But, you know, as we learn, adoption comes up and the costs eventually come down. So an example I'd love to give is our transition from horses to cars. Who would have ever thought that, you know, we'll all afford cars and cars will be something really affordable, you know, landlines to mobile phones, and, you know, the electric battery that is, you know, the volume of adoption has come up, and now the costs become lower and lower each and every year. So we set these goals mainly because we believe in the power of human innovation. So you just can't give up. You know, solar might seem expensive now, but who knows, in a couple of years, the solar panel will be in each and every home, and we'll no longer have use of the main line of power. But now just to answer the second question, I believe, okay, so I really love that you asked this question, because this is a topic I've had the time to research on. You see, Africa is a growing continent, and, you know, yet despite the abundance of goods and natural resources that mainly characterize the continent, we still have to be really cautious when you talk about the energy transition. And despite the remarkable progress in the fields of industry and manufacturing, I still think that we have a long way to go. Because kutoka kitambo, I think from 1970s, Africa can easily be said to contribute to the least of any continent when it comes to global warming. And yet, sub-Saharan Africa has 35 of the 45 countries, you know, globally at the highest climate risk. These countries are namely, we have Chad, we have the likes of Somalia, we have the CAR Republic, we have Eritrea, we have the Democratic Republic of Congo, and these countries were said to be the least capable of adapting to the impact of climate change. So we cannot help but just circle back to the question of, are we rather helpless as a continent? So I sat and thought about this question, and honestly, I said we are not. You know, there's so many efforts that we as Africans can do, but there's one that definitely stands out. And, you know, I know this has been said throughout the whole week of the climate debate. This effort that stands out is education. Through the introduction of climate sciences in the school curriculum, we can now smoothen this energy transition. And I believe that a comprehensive education on climate change and its effects is very paramount, as it teaches Africans about effective land use planning, you know, to avoid issues such as forest degradation. And also it emphasizes on the importance of maintaining a balance across all fields in regards to conservation. So I believe, Opondo and my fellow panelists, that we'll be lying to ourselves and maybe shooting ourselves in the feet, you know, by puppeting, as Africa now, as by puppeting the Europeans and the West, you know, in their methods of development. And this has been a question that has been brought up many a times. I believe that we're lucky to be, you know, to be alive in a time where the world is so globalized that we can afford to make, we cannot afford to make the same mistakes that I see many African countries making, including our very own Kenya, you know, whereby we want to follow the development styles to the letter. I'll give an example. So now we see them now moving from the 70s to the 80s, from steam-powered railway systems to diesel-powered ones, and now we're the ones to follow suit. You know, same goes to their transition to now the electric-powered rails. Why can't we, as a country, as a continent, why can't we jump the gun? You know, we don't go to the diesel. You know, we're spending billions of taxpayers and borrowed money to struggle and finish a dead project. That's what I call it. You know, we try to finish this diesel-powered railway system instead of just jumping the gun just a bit and moving from this ancient system into a more advanced and cleaner railway system anyway. So we just need to shun and outdo this form of ancient and out, you know, the old a form of thinking, and it is only then that we can truly progress. That's what I believe. Thank you.
Wonderful, Jeremy Atambo. Maria, your thoughts on this as we come to the end of this the second round of questions, and now then allow members, those also chatting the other side, to bring in their thoughts. Maria?
Thank you. So I will start by responding to something Eugene mentioned regarding the case he brought, where, you know, with M-KOPA, I would have to get credit and call an agent and then get my lamp and be put on a payment plan, as opposed to walking to the local store and just buying a kerosene lamp, yeah? And I want to emphasize that one of my biggest points as to how we will tackle climate change as a country and continent as a whole is, number one, when people are comfortable getting uncomfortable and owning the problem, yeah? And I say that because it has to reach a point where, as an individual, yes, it is easier for me to go to the local store, but I'm actively choosing another option because I'm aware of the impact it will have in the long run, yeah? And that is what that point also closely ties to education, yeah? We need people to understand why it's important for you. Yes, it might be a bit more difficult. It might take a bit more time. It might take a bit more an effort for me to take an alternative as opposed to what I'm used to, but it's very necessary. So that's one of the things I just want to point out is something I'm very, it's a stance I'm very passionate about. Yes, so in terms of, yes, Africa is very rich in sources of renewable energy. What should Africa be doing right now? So Africa already is on the right track, I would say. I'd say there's a lot of strives. You see a lot of innovation. I mean, Africa has the largest growing population of the world and the youngest population of all the continents. So I would say that there have been strives in the right direction. And I just think we, the people, need to amplify. I think the focus needs to stop being on this being a government issue and this instead being an each and every one of us issue. Like each and every one of us has a role to play in solving the issue of climate change, in ensuring that renewable energy solutions are available to the common person. So I'll give a few alternatives to energy in Kenya and why I think such innovations should be amplified. Yeah, we saw the story of Magiro. Magiro hydropower can be implemented in so many rural communities which have the exact same base case, yeah, where we have energy solutions. You'll find even, we took a trip to Kitui and found they also have like rivers. You'll find waterfalls in different parts of the rural parts of the country. Are we finding that renewable hydroelectric solutions are available? Yeah. So Magiro hydroelectric power could be a solution that's implemented in different rural areas. D-Light and M-KOPA are also alternatives.
Maria, just to hold it there. Maria, just to hold it there because that's a very practical example. How do you think we can implement Magiro hydropower to other communities? What is the direction that we should be taking right now?
I think the first thing to take from his story is, number one, tailoring the solution directly to what the community needs, yeah? So he identified that in his community, these are the challenges we are facing. He also identified these are the resources we have readily available in our community, yes? So he found we have this waterfall, it's always flowing with water. We also have these different houses which all don't have electricity. What can be done? Then he looked at, within his skills, he could identify the bicycle, sorry, I'm not going to get too technical, but the part of the bicycle that could be used to generate energy was also very readily available. So I think the first thing we can take from his story is, number one, identify what we do have. Like what is it that in this community we are working with? In another part of the country, it could be they have hills and access to a lot of wind power here. So we would then identify how do we then tap into this resource. I think we need to, it's not, there's no blanket solution to climate change, and different parts of the country are blessed with different resources. I think the best thing then is to identify those, identify the skill sets readily available again. So if you have people who are engineers or good at hydroelectric power, or others good at wind and building turbines, let's tap into that skill set and then implement solutions for that community. And from there you can scale. So that is what I would suggest, yeah.
Wonderful. Or if Weshuli, Professor Weshuli, if it is okay with you, you can speak up. You can be brought to this side. I'm informed you're not okay with the video, but you can just do the audio. I'll request for the debaters just to keep their videos on, so that we listen to what Professor Weshuli has to say about this question and this segment that we're tackling. Omukoko, if possible, also you can come to this other side. Omukoko, if you can hear me and that is okay with you, you can come to this other side because you've raised also some interesting messages there. I would like everyone just to hear what is happening on the other side. Professor Weshuli,
Okay.
are you there? Yes.
Okay. Hello. Can you hear me?
Very well.
Okay. Thank you. I think the issue which I was concerned about is after checking on the research of KSIF in 2018, which stated very clearly that for Kenya, firewood and charcoal accounts for 69% of the total primary energy consumption. And you get that this consumption, and also almost 90% of the rural population is dependent on firewood for cooking and heating, while 82% of, for those people now who are living in the urban areas, they still also depend on this charcoal. So you see, I got concerned because you get that due to this, we get to harvest a lot from the forest, which is beyond what our environment can give. And this unsustainable demand for wood fuel has led to deforestation. And here, remember, we are trying to look at this issue of energy with climate change. And you see that we have gone even to an extent, like I can say from where I come from, I've seen this happening where agricultural residues are being used, such as the maize cobs, the maize stalks, to be used also in as a mode of providing fuel wood. And we have also seen women and children wasting a lot of time because they have to travel to very long distances looking for this wood because of this fuel. And somebody is speaking about the other sources, for example, the solar and the other, I've said the renewable sources. But what about their reliability? Because you get that something like solar, when you get to use solar, you say that it is not that reliable, I can say that. And also with solar, the equipment acquisition is not that cheap. You cannot just acquire it that easily. So you get that, I can say that what we need, we also need to think of an issue that if trees, they can get to provide us a very high percentage of energy that we can get to consume. Why don't we have a habit of then planting more trees to make sure that at least it can give more than even what we need, so that at least to get to deal with that. And also, as I conclude, we also need to keep in mind that, like, for the carbon cycle, what helps us mostly in balancing the carbon in the air, still this comes from the forest. So I think we need also to invest in expanding our forests, our trees here and there. I think. Thank you.
Okay. An interesting statement there from Professor Weshuli is saying, if then trees offer that solution, why can't we just accept it and cut but be replacing? I mean, you remember when we were young, we were told that before you cut a tree, plant first, cut one and plant two. Is that still the direction that we want to take, even as our country, even as a continent right now? Omukoko Okoth, unmute and turn on your video if possible.
Thank you very much. Unfortunately, I'm traveling. I may not be able to turn on my video.
Okay.
But what I was saying is that renewable energy suffers from unguaranteed reliability and lack of funding because it's not as cheap as someone mentioned earlier. And aside from that, we are also dealing with competition from already working sources of energy. And so it is very hard for human beings to shift as quickly as we would want them to from something that is working to something that has not attained those levels of efficiency. So I think that is a problem that we are suffering from. And I think if government subsidize renewable energy, we'll be in a good position, and we will entice more investors to invest in that field. Thank you.
Wonderful. Ali Malekane is saying that he has a solution to what Mukoko is addressing. Ali Malekane, you're on the screen. Then also bring Paul Kitui on the screen. Ali, go first. If we have,
yes,
Ali.
All right. Okay. Yeah. Firstly, I want to disagree with the first second speaker who said that so the cost of equipment for solar is expensive. Here we're not looking at the issue of solar is expensive. We are looking on the issue of renewable energy. That's one thing that you need to understand. Yes, solar can be expensive, but it's renewable, and the life expectancy of solar it's quite different compared to the coals which they've been used, especially in South Africa now. We have a lot of coal mines which are actually producing coal so that the provider of electricity, which is Eskom, they will just do pollution. So, but if it's solar, it doesn't matter how much does it cost, but what matters is the life expectancy of the solar. Secondly, I want to disagree with the last speaker. It's not always about the government to fund us. How can you fund somebody to start a bakery? They're going to use your money to do mistake. Fund yourself so that if you do mistake, you learn from your mistake. I thank you, my speaker.
Wonderful, Ali. Great. Paul Kitui, you're on the call. Paul Kitui, you're on the call. Unmute yourself.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Very well.
Yeah, so energy and climate change are often rightly linked by policymakers and politicians because since the Industrial Revolution, fossil fuels have powered the global economy, but have also altered the atmosphere undeniably. But the thing we have to, and we will think that, fossil fuels and such will be discouraged because of a few disincentives. For example, since the 60s, fossil fuel as something that accounts for the average household income has risen by over 10%. We know it's obvious detriment to the climate, but it's not that easy of a transition because we are walking into a sort of an unknown when going into renewable sources, because it's a fact that it's very, very hard to shift, especially with these, because renewable sources still have low efficiency percentages. They have expensive storage.
Okay. Did we lose Kitui? Okay, great. Atambo, your hand is up.
Yes, Opondo. Sorry, I just wanted to answer, I think it's Professor Weshuli, when he mentioned we should increase our demand for wood. I believe that wood is very unreliable, especially in large scale, as while alive, they do act as carbon sinks. But wood, unlike oil, coal, and natural gas, is not considered a fossil fuel. But now decomposing trees do give off carbon dioxide, and so does burning firewood. He should instead opt for other renewable sources such as solar, maybe wind, talk of electricity. The goal is race to zero, and wood in large scale, especially growing and now chopping down to produce firewood, will really contribute vastly in global warming. So that's my take on that. Thank you.
Great. And even before we move on, there's a question here from one of our very firm supporters, Maurice Ouma Odiambo. He's asking, when it comes to renewable and the last mile, how can climate change and energy fit in regards to SDG 7? Okay, I don't know if there's anyone of you in the panel who would like to address that question. That when it comes to renewable and the last mile, how can climate change and energy fit in regards to SDG number 7? Anyone who would like to give it an attempt? Or okay. Anyone would like to give it an attempt? Okay, Maria.
All right, so renewable energy ties hand in hand with SDG 7. So SDG 7 proposes to ensure access to affordable, reliable, sustainable, and modern energy for all. Yeah, it's already, we've been given a bit of background history in terms of how over half of the population of sub-Saharan Africa is cut off from electricity as a whole, about how people in rural areas are even more affected and so resort to more traditional methods of getting energy, for example, burning firewood. So the SDG, the goal itself, is tied hand in hand with renewable energy. Now, the thing with renewable energy, as has been stated, is that it has and I liked how the previous speaker said that renewable energy has a longer lifespan. So we are not burning the firewood today and tomorrow we have to go out and look for more firewood. Yeah, we are investing in this solution. And so for the years to come, we are now relying on the God-given gift of sun. Yeah, and then of course with maintenance, etc. So I think investing and building and innovating around renewable energy will ensure we are making sure it's accessible for a long period of time to the greater population of Africa. And I think this is very important because, again, like I said, Africa has such a young population and we have such growing economies. We need this energy and we need it to last. We don't want short-term solutions that we are having to pay very large costs. In fact, Jeremy mentioned how when we are investing in train systems that were used 50, 100 years ago, we are actually moving backwards instead of moving forward. Yeah. So renewable energy ensures we are investing in long-term energy solutions to drive this growing economy, to power our solutions, our industries as we move forward. Yes.
Great. And that is how now we jump into the next question. That's the third question. I like how we are going so far because these questions are, one question just leading to the other. Some of your contributions, you realize that some of the answers you've given are already addressing the question that we'll be tackling ahead. So keep bringing the questions and the Q&A segment. You can keep throwing the questions, and also from the chat box, have a team of wonderful people just at the background there, making sure that all that is said is coming to my attention. Yes, so even as we talk about Africa being blessed with all the sources of renewable energy, the question has always been, is Africa ready? What are the barriers? What are some of the challenges to Africa? Moving like any other country or like any other continent that are already now taking the direction towards green energy. Is Africa ready for energy transition? What are some of the barriers that we are facing as a continent? As young people, what do you have to say? Because remember, if you visit most of our schools today, even some schools in the city centers like in Nairobi, in schools like in Kampala and even Dar es Salaam, I've seen schools that even in the city center, they still use fire, they still use charcoal. That is happening in the cities. Now you can imagine the schools at our rural areas and other places. What is the barrier to Africa moving in the direction of the energy revolution, the green energy revolution that is taking place? Eugene, again, let me start with you. Then we go straight to Atambo, come back to Maria.
I think generally Africa is more than ready. It's even more ready than most of the other continents because we need it more than these continents need it. And I'd like to give the illustration.
Do you think because of the need means someone is ready?
Yes and no. Yes, in the sense that because there's the need, therefore it means we have the motivation and that inner purpose to actually do something about it because of that need. But now in terms of if ready, like you mentioned earlier, and we've correctly come to realize everybody agrees to, we have the resource, like we have the capability and the resources to do that. But I feel like which now draws to what are the barriers is like our priorities are not right. We have the resources. We've had Kenya using billions of shillings to plan for a BBI that nobody asked for, nobody was ready for, but they don't have the same amount of money to invest in any NGO that is actually doing any real work to solve climate change issues. We have them investing, like I think it's Maria who just mentioned it, or Jeremy, about the old trains. They're investing in trains that, for example, use the old system, they emit gases instead of investing in trains that use renewable sources of energy, or trains that are actually sustainable for the future. So the priorities are wrong, but we are ready in this sense. For example, when one of the biggest opportunities Africa missed out of, and right now we've become sort of the beggars and in the backseat when it comes to anything else, it's technology. The Western countries had an advantage that they jumped on technology faster than us, and we are playing catch up. But in this case of climate change, we have an opportunity to be in the driver's seat. because we have all the, we have an advantage in terms of the requirements for somebody to say, if we, for example, we speak about solar energy, if we speak about using of windmills, if we speak about using any form of source of energy, renewable source of energy you can think of, Africa has a bigger advantage of implementing it than most of these Western countries. But the problem now is that our priorities are not set there. And therefore you find that even when it comes to this, we need it most, but in the end, they will have gain control of who runs the industries that supply renewable energies, who runs the companies that produce the components, which has been a very big issue of we don't have the resources, for example, to set up solar energy, which is expensive. We have the resources, but we are putting them in the wrong places. And I think that's one of the barriers that we need to realize. Another barrier, I think, which came from what Jeremy was saying earlier, I think it's the complacency and the believing in that issue of transition. We need to transition. We need to take time. Imagine if with COVID, we decided, if when it came to COVID, we decided that, you know, it will be very hard for people to transition from not working, staying at home. How will they eat? Those were questions that were asked. For example, Rwanda was one of the countries that had one of the most strict lockdowns that were there. But later on, everybody is thanking the government and thanking that it was that strict, because what they could have lost or what they have gained by coming back early and loosening the restrictions early is a benefit that people can appreciate. So when it comes to climate change too, we need to create that urgency. We need to create that urgency so that people don't see it as a matter of option, but rather as a do or die. And I think is what the climate change activists allude to when they say our climate is on fire, and therefore we cannot start thinking anything else until we switch off the fire. So one of the biggest barriers that I would say it's wrong prioritization and also the lack of urgency in solving this. And in question of whether Africa is ready, I think we are ready because we have all the necessary conditions that can enable us implement it earlier, implement it faster. Because actually, if even on research basis, we have people who have more problems in relation to climate change compared to the rest of the world. So if in innovation you want to test out a solution, Africa is the best place to do so because we face these problems that come from that each and every day. Therefore, we are ready, but we are prioritizing wrongly, and we are also not creating the right urgency when it comes to implementing solutions towards climate change.
Okay, Eugene, let me ask you a question before you go, even before I go to Jeremy Atambo. You've mentioned the issue of BBI, very timely that you mentioned such an issue in this kind of a conversation. Would you vote for a leader in the next general elections in Kenya if the leader had climate change, climate action in his manifesto? Is it something to consider? Yes or no? Do you think it can be? Is it something that can make you relook on voting? Oh, yes.
Yeah, definitely. I would look at him differently compared to the rest of the candidates. He'd have an advantage in my vetting compared to other candidates. That will not.
And that's why you shouldn't miss tomorrow's debate, brother. Tomorrow it will be hot. 4 nationalities represented on this panel, sorry, talking about climate change and politics and voting and the governance and everything. Jeremy Atambo, Africa ready for the transition? What are the barriers?
So
maybe just in 2 minutes, kindly, because we have a follow-up question to that.
Okay, so I'd say no, and I'd also like to answer your question about the leadership. I believe that we will not push for empty promises. We need to see you on the ground working towards a greener and the race to zero. So first of all, before we can talk about any sort of energy transition, Africa needs to stop all these petty debates on whether climate change is a crisis or not. You know, we need to realize, my brothers and sisters, that the climate crisis is with us, and it is indeed an existential crisis on the whole of humanity. So you see, the problem with us Africans is that we lack cohesion. And why is that? The first one is because of very low levels of trust we have among ourselves. This is, of course, referring to interpersonal and institutional levels of trust. You see Kenyan companies outsourcing labor instead of entrusting our own, and you see the Chinese coming in and taking over. I'm sorry to say that. It's quite saddening. So ignorance can also and should also not be undermined, because many Africans refuse to absorb information. We're quite ignorant. This information will help them, you know, to those who are willing, this and those who are not, they view this information as expensive, and some say that it cannot easily be accessed. My third point on why Africa is not ready, you see, African states contain weak policies and infrastructure, and this makes it rather tedious when it comes to enforcement or implementation. That being so, there is a heavy reliance on outward powers, such as, again, as I mentioned, China and other developed economies. So my last point on this is maybe we may have the infrastructure and we may have the strong policy, but if we cannot eradicate the plague that is corruption, we are just shooting ourselves in the feet. We're shooting blank shots. Monopolies, you see, monopolies have taken over the energy sector in many African countries. Talk of KPLC, even here in Kenya and the likes. You know, instead of pushing forward for renewable sources of energy, they're pushing the regression towards other ancient forms of energy so that they can maximize their profits. Renewable alternatives such as solar and wind sectors are really struggling to pick up and flourish, simply because there are few greedy individuals who want to hold us back as a nation. So I can go on and on about Africa, and just allow me to skip just in a minute or so to what energy transition truly entails and what it means to Africa.
Exactly. So exactly, that's why I wanted us to head to. That is the follow-up question, and I'd also like Maria to address that when she'll be talking about it. So some of the opportunities that are hidden or that are presented by this transition, Jeremy Atambo.
Okay, so I firmly believe that we should all view energy transition not as an event, but rather as an eventful process. And therefore, we can, before we can get to the zero carbon future, we need to accept that there will be a lot of disruption in almost all or most sectors of the global economy. This means that some jobs will definitely fade away whilst newer jobs arise. And however, this transition is inevitable. It gives us time. It gives us time to plan with all partners that are involved in the race to zero, be it schools, be it the workforce, be it companies, be it governments. And thus we have to believe that in order to have a smoother transition, we should all come together like as one and just form a clear and substantial end goal. So just to reiterate, this very transition will definitely not be easy, especially for those people, you know, who are currently working in high polluting industries. They still have time to adapt before they face the harsh reality of now being rendered jobless. But we have time together to just manage this transition. And just lastly, this time can be used to acquire new skills, and we can go look for work in the new industries that will come up. And now thus they will deliver clean and healthier cities and environments that we all deserve, and we can now gracefully hand over to our children and future generations. That is all for me in this question. Thank you so much.
Great, Maria, tackle the same, and also even the opportunities presented. Kindly, 3 minutes.
All right, so I'll start by briefly disagreeing with Jeremy. I think very often we critique Kenya Power, but in fact, the World Bank estimates that first, Kenya has one of the biggest wind farms and geothermal power plants in Africa, and has almost doubled the share of the population that it now provides access to between 2007 and 2017. So while they do have their mismanagement and their power cuts that we do not like, there's actually been positive steps towards the right direction. And I think sometimes it's good to give credit where it's deserved. So I'll start by answering the first question: is Africa ready for energy transition? And I will agree with Eugene that Africa is ready. And I say this because we need to stop looking at Africa as this abstract, too big to handle, corruption riddled, and to look at Africa as me and you. Is Maria ready for an energy transition? Are you, as an audience, ready for an energy transition? If your answer is no, you need to identify why. But if your answer is yes, and I believe for some of us the answer is yes, I think that then can start the conversation of what do we need to do to implement because again, I keep reiterating the fact that this is a problem that we have to see as individuals, we have to identify as necessary to us in our daily lives, not looking at it as if everybody is not on this wave, then none of us are, you know. Look at it the way Magiro looked at the problem. It was in my community as an individual, what can I do to take steps in this positive direction? And then he went and innovated, and now over 3,000 people are benefiting from it and are on the renewable energy side. Again, I think it's very important for each and every one of us as Africans, as Kenyans, South Africans, to look at yourself as an individual and ask yourself, are you ready, and what steps can you make in the right direction when it comes to climate change and energy? However, I do agree there are barriers to this full adoption of renewable energy on the continent here. Some have been mentioned, but you find, number one, the issue of inclusivity. Yeah, renewable energy sources are seen as something that is expensive, is only available to certain people who earn a certain amount of money, and so it's not for everyone. Yeah, you find again that certain skills required. You know, we might be saying, why did Kenya go for trains that are outdated? But then again, do we have the engineers who can actually build train systems that are running fully on renewable energy? Yeah, do we have even these innovative solutions that Kenyans themselves can build? Again, at least I can say yes. In certain things, I think we've seen that there's solutions that are coming from Africa for Africans in the right direction when it comes to innovating for renewable energy. So at least you do find in certain cases that this skill set, there's a bit of a gap. But again, you do find that this skill set is slowly being provided to by Africans. So we are not simply looking for outsiders to come and innovate and give us these solutions. Yeah. And finally, again, there's public policy. Yeah. These policies, if they were in place and properly implemented, I mean, African governments could do a lot with what they have, but we are seeing that there's a lot of it's like they've taken a back seat when it comes to climate change. Again, the culture that it's an issue, but it's not really an issue we need to be focusing on, which again taps to the mindset around climate change that again needs to be addressed, not only on government side and policy side, but also again as individuals. So the last question you asked was now regarding opportunities, like what opportunities do we need to be tapping into in order to achieve the goal of implementing renewable energy solutions in Africa. And again, I will point to each and every individual. Number one has to see this as a problem that affects me, it affects my family, it affects my community, my country, my continent. What can I do? So as somebody in tech, for example, yeah, are there solutions that I can become a part of? Can I become a part of discussions? Can I join volunteer groups so that we can come together and actually implement these solutions? And I think if everybody asks themselves that question and then in their own spaces put themselves in places where they were actively coming up with solutions, over the years, you'd actually see the ripple effect of each and all of our contributions come together and actually have a very big impact. So as opposed to waiting for the government to unleash 10 trillion today in renewable energy, if each and every one of us just did our own, played our own small role over 10 years, 20 years, 50 years, we would find that we've actually invested double the amount of money and we are actually seeing the impact. So that is what I would say. I think it falls on the individual, and then as a collective, we can have a very great impact. Yeah.
Great. Before we come to our last question of the day, Ohisa Oduho, kindly come forward. If possible, turn on your video and your audio, so then we get to hear what you have to say. Introduce yourself and where you are joining us from, or which country you are representing on this panel. Ohisa Oduho. Yes, Ohisa Oduho, unmute. And
yes,
turn on your video.
Yes, can you hear me clearly?
Very well.
Now,
In a minute, kindly.
very well, thank you. As for the question that you posed, I believe
your name and where you're joining us from.
I am Ohisa Oduho. I am joining from Nairobi. I come from South Sudan, and I believe that the issue of whether Africa is ready cannot be looked at from the perspective of Africa as a whole. Because, for example, as I come from South Sudan, okay, where access to foreign direct investment is pretty much problematic because of the political situation, the risk posed to investors towards investing in renewable energy sources in the country is limited to the credit risk that they're exposed to, and this is a matter across the African continent. And as such, on the matter of whether Africa is ready, it is a matter that should be answered depending on the African country being dealt with at any given time. And just a brief question to the panelists is that as much as it's being mentioned, implementation is the main problem towards the transition towards renewable energy. And as such, what role does the private sector play? Because in my opinion, I believe the private sector is the one that is responsible for bridging the gap of investment, of attracting foreign direct investment, and even just generally private investment towards this transition. Because I believe in this specific issue, that is the problem that must be addressed. How can we attract investment into the issue of renewable energies while circumventing the credit risk that would be posed to investors? Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, John Ohisa Oduho. Now, even as we move into our fourth question, I'm also hoping that during that time, you can also maybe address some of the issues raised by John Ohisa Oduho here. The fourth question that we're tackling tonight is a rather very interesting question that now testing on what the brightest and the best of African youth can do, or some of the ideas you can put in place, or kind of initiatives that they can get involved in to benefit economically from this transition we are talking about, and also to offer communities green energy solutions, even as all this happen. Yeah, how can the best and the brightest of African youth innovate and employ technology to benefit economically, and at the same time offer our communities green energy solutions? So this is now also testing on what we can do. We as the debaters in this room, and even those watching from home, the young, the brothers going to school, we are studying different courses. Yesterday, we were reminded on this panel, actually on Monday, we were reminded on this panel that climate change is not about farmers alone. It is not about the activists. Climate change is about everyone. That was from Omar. And then came in a very interesting twist from Sohina, who said, the only qualification you need to fight for climate is the fact that you are living in this planet. That is enough for you. That is a conversation that was very interesting on Monday. I see Lesen in the panel. Lesen was also part of that conversation, and so many other people were sending in their messages. And tonight we are asking ourselves here once more, what can we do? Now, leave alone those we are talking about, the brightest and the best. We are the people on this panel, with the courses that we are studying, with the knowledge that we have, the skills that we've acquired. How then do we employ these skills to ensure that we are moving on together from those in the rural areas to those in the urban areas? We are moving on together, and at the same time also identifying the opportunities that are available so that we achieve this, we get maximum benefit from all this transition. Jeremy Atambo, let me start with you now.
Okay, very well. Thank you so much. So just off the top of my head.
Kindly just to insist, do this in 2 minutes. I'll be very strict on that one now because we have 16 minutes to go.
Sure. So just off the top of my head, information, widespread mass education, inclusivity and involvement, decision-making, and employ your skills with a drive towards a zero carbon future. But I did want to share a story. I was just going through Topping's TED Talk on climate. He's a climate action champion, and the 3 aforementioned rules, the rules for a zero carbon future. I was just perusing YouTube the other day, So I just came across this TED Talk. It's given around about a month ago. And this was, of course, geared towards COP26. So he just kicks us off by telling us about his backstory. His grandfather in his youth, growing up in northwest of England, Wigan to be specific, which was surrounded by 1,000 coal mines, 1,000 coal mines just around a 5 miles radius. So now you see, for generations, his descendants now are coal miners, and it will have only been natural for now his grandfather to also be one. But now his grandfather chose a different path, and he got a scholarship in math and went to study math. And Nigel took the same strategy, and now he pursued math and discovered his loves for patterns and systems. So on working with industries for substantial times, what the youth have realized that there are two systems, the human system and the natural system, and they can now be thought of as a set of recurring patterns. And I very much agree. For example, when you take the energy system, we can still trace the patterns of a reliance of fossil fuels all the way to the 1700s. And in order to combat climate change as a youth, there's need to adopt new patterns, that are based on cleaner powers and practices. So now there's a physical impact of climate change. You can see this where by the movement of glaciers more than 15 kilometers from where they originally are in the map. And now you see that there's something that's really changing these patterns. So now the youth should study these patterns. And I do agree that when tackling the climate change, it can prove rather difficult. Now when you view it in terms of now the politics and economics. But now back to his 3 rules. Let me just mention them quickly because of time constraints.
5 seconds left.
Okay, we should harness what we call ambition loops. These are now feedbacks loops that are driving higher levels of ambitions. For example, now when businesses commit to zero carbon and begin investing and innovating, they embolden now policymakers. And these policymakers now set the regulatory framework to drive zero carbon, and then they incentivize the private sector to invest as well, just to answer Do's question. The second one is setting exponential goals, which I had mentioned. Now, from history, every major breakthrough and disruption has followed the same shape, an exponential curve. And now with new tech being adopted and very slowly, at first, the doubling rate kicks in, and now there's overall transformation that happens over time. I mentioned the transitions from horses to cars and all that. And now maybe the last one, we should all follow as a youth. We should now strive to follow the shared pathways. And the shared pathways, these are just, maps. The maps of the actions that like every actor in the system has to take to ensure that we're on the same boat and indeed on track to the zero carbon future. These are just short-term goals that are set every 5 years, as I'd recommend now before we can review them and now determine the rest of the journey. But thank you so much.
Tambo, I fear you. You have so many last points. Now to my last point, but anyway, that's good.
Thank you.
Eugene, please, in 2 minutes.
In terms of what the youth or people my type can do to help with the situation, I'll take a personal perspective where my career aspirations and involvements are mostly in venture capital, dealing with startups, their growth and their funding and all that. And one of the things we've noticed, or people have noticed in the venture capital space, is the fact that Africa has become very attractive for funding, because the innovations in startups and these small businesses and companies has grown each and every day. It's growing, and more investors are looking towards Africa because the innovators are too many and the innovations they have are very realistic. And I think when you look at the amount of money that is being invested in the solutions that young Africans are creating every day, if only most of them, or majority of them at least, will focus their solutions in climate change and energy related fields, then they'll give a huge, they'll remove a huge burden from these back and forth debates we have, like our government is corrupt, it's not investing in the right things, our government has its priorities wrong. All these reasons, we can eliminate them by we, the youth, who are right now inventing, who are right now seeking solutions. We are the ones who are starting initiatives. We are the ones who are starting NGOs, like you have started Camp Day and many other initiatives. If only now we drive the solutions and the innovations we have as the youth, towards climate change and energy-related solutions, we have a better opportunity to succeed, because finally, even the West, forget our own governments and our own fellow Africans, the West is investing in African solutions right now. We've had over 1.3 billion invested just in 2021 in startups in Africa, yet we are still grappling with COVID-19 effects. So imagine how much more we can get in these solutions that Africans are right now creating for solutions, if only we could shape them towards the future. And one thing I think the West has better than Africa is that they always think long-term. In their evil and their good, they think long-term. Be it slavery, be it technology, they will always think long-term. So if right now we sell to them our ideas and our solutions for Africa, showing them the benefits that they can reap in the long term, because again, it's business, solutions lead to businesses. So you show them how they can reap in the long term by focusing on issues like climate change and renewable energy. I believe if we do that and focus on climate change as we build initiatives, NGOs, anything that right now youth are building, if we can shape it in that perspective, then we'll be able to have a chance and we can be able to solve that problem from the ground, from the people who are still young and enthusiastic and more knowledgeable, because some of the people in the higher positions who are supposed to be solving this, they might not. I'm sure you can ask a member of parliament in Kenya, maybe they'll tell you it's the floods or something. So generally, I believe we're in a better position as the youth as problem solutions to follow that path and drive it in that direction. Thanks.
Wonderful. Maria, on the same question. But then Maria, as also a member of Kenya Safi, because you are part of a very interesting network and a very interesting movement, if I may call it so. We've seen what you are doing as Kenya Safi, and I know Jen will be joining us tomorrow. Jen Mitch is also a member of Kenya Safi. Interestingly, the only lady in the panel tomorrow also, and the only Kenyan will be in the panel tomorrow talking about climate change and politics. Maria, what can we do, or what are some of the opportunities you see that offers that are giving us some platforms to keep on doing what we're doing to make the change that we want?
All right. So just before I go into Kenya Safi and the different opportunities, I think I had three main propositions to the African youth. The first one is be informed. As an African youth, be informed. Be informed of what your carbon footprint is, what your family's carbon footprint is, what your school's carbon footprint is. What are some of the things you can do, change, but you have to start by number one, being informed of the problem. The second one is making it your problem. I think too often than not, we think of it as a big problem that affects other people and somebody else will solve it. No, I think we need to own the issue itself. And then that way we can then come into my third suggestion, which is simply start, yeah? Put yourself as an individual in spaces where you're actually actively working towards a positive direction. And one of those spaces could be, you can actually reach out to Kenya Safi. So Kenya Safi is basically an organization started by young people, which is trying to make a positive impact in the fight against climate change, whether it's in plastic pollution, whether it's in renewable energy sources. Basically, what can we as African youth do? What are some of the activities we can come together and do in order to mitigate the problems of the solution? Yeah. So this then ties to each and every one of us, as Eugene mentioned, has a role to play in actually solving this problem. Among us, we have people who maybe have ties with people in the government, can contribute to talks on policy. Among us, we have people who are future venture capitalists who can actually secure funding for these innovations. Among us, we have innovators, entrepreneurs. Each and every one of us have to understand that if we are informed, if we see this as a problem that is ours for the solving, then we can actually look in our individual lives, what can we actually do? What can we participate in to take active steps into solving the problem of climate change when it comes to energy? So yeah, be informed, make it your problem, and please start.
I like that. Be informed and make it your problem. And also like the point that Eugene mentioned, that the difference between the West and Africa is that they think long-term. whether they are planning to harm people or planning to help, is always about long term. So maybe Africa should also start thinking along that direction. I think this has been one of the most interesting conversations. You know, climate change matters have not been, I mean, they are not topics which Kenyans are used to discussing. The fact that you people can come to this panel and having done your research and presenting all these interesting ideas just tells that you are concerned. And remember, we said on day one, we said it on day two, and again, we reminded people when we are beginning today that we are not coming here because we are experts, but because we are concerned. We're just young Africans who are concerned. Sometimes maybe we are even making mistakes. We don't even know if some of the things we're saying are right or wrong, but the fact that we are able to come to this panel and talk about these issues. At a time like this, you could be doing something somewhere else. You could maybe be partying or preparing for your exams, but you've chosen to spend your 2 hours here to have this great conversation. Definitely means that we are really prepared, and as a continent, maybe just a matter of pushing us to be more and more prepared, and also our ability to discover the opportunities that exist in this whole transition to green energy that we are talking about. As now we head to almost the close of this conversation, before I even take us through some of the key points which have come up from this conversation, I don't know whether there's anyone from the audience who would like to just give a quick reaction to the whole conversation that we've been having here. Just a quick reaction, because I know all questions have been tackled. Yes, the question that Ali Malekane raised, that question, we tackled it at some point. Just a quick reaction, and please just do it in a few seconds because we have to wrap this one up. Omukoko Okoth, and please, less than a minute if you say so, or I'll just tell my director to mute you when you're taking more than that. Omukoko Okoth, you're on the call, and Oisa Oduho. Omukoko, go first.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, Opondo. I think for me, aside from not thinking long term, as Eugene has mentioned, sometimes when we think long term, like for instance, the Vision 2060, we are not very good at implementation. So I think that is the other thing Africa also needs to work on. Thank you.
I like that, Mukoko. Before you go, I mean, Agenda 2063, where by now actually you should have taken the guns from the hands of children. You should have taken, I mean, educated a certain percentage of our population to date. Look at where we are. So Mukoko also raises an issue of implementation, not just thinking long term, but also implementation of the long term thought. Ohisa Oduho, you're on the call.
Yes, thank you, Brother Opondo.
In less than a minute,
very well. Listening to the panelists, I can confidently say that the future of Africa is secure, given the kind of minds that we have. And that while the situation may seem dire today, that there is hope. And that much I am very well guaranteed, given the caliber of the distinguished panel that we have today. Congratulations to all of them for giving their best. And I'm confident that in such a generation, that we have a solution to our problems. The future is secure. Thank you.
Okay, and Maria, someone is saying congratulations and is asking, can he get your number? But that is a conversation for another day and a different place. Who else is here? Let me see. Can we get a lady also just give a quick reaction to this on this, because this conversation need not just to be about men and men only. Do we have maybe Florence Achala or Rosalind Omondi or Lungashi Kidaka? You are here on day one. Anyone of you would like to give a quick reaction? Maybe a female voice before we go to wrapping it up. Can we bring, okay, great. Who is here? Let me see who is here. I don't want to pick Ali Malekane because I know where I'll bring him in. Do we have Lungashi? Lungashi, just a quick reaction to all this conversation? Or even Victory Wangui. Victory Mugambi, wherever you are, you can come to the screen kindly. Kidaka saying this is quite insightful. Kidaka, I would like you to come to the screen and say that here. Majala Francisca, if possible. I mean, we are in this together. Let me see who is willing to come to the screen. Great. Okay. Okay, no problem then. So just some quick takeaways from this great conversation that we've been having since we began up to now. almost 2 hours, that in order to achieve energy equality, government all across the globe should employ inclusivity, making energy affordable to everyone as it still remains expensive. That is very true. That's a point that came from one of the speakers here, that every member of society should be represented in the decision-making process towards zero carbon emission. That is very true. The point came from one of the speakers here. Affordability over the years has been used as an excuse. If I remember very well, that came from Maria Gitao. Affordability has always been a matter of excuse. Who can afford, who can't afford, certain kind of energies are meant for certain kind of people. So let us run away from these and do what we can. Introduction of climate science in the curriculum to help increase awareness in the society. There's need to refocus from clean energy being government issue to it being an individual strive, because we tend to leave a lot to the government. We are always telling our government to do something. How about we as individuals? What can we do in this energy transition? Energy transition is not an event, but will be an eventual process. That came from Jeremy Atambo, if I remember very well, that there's no blanket solution to climate change. Let's use what we have in terms of skills and resources within the continent. Then that the difference between us and the ways that they think long-term, that one was properly captured, be it slavery or technology. They think long-term, and we need to think long-term on energy issues. And that's now where Mukoko came in to give a very safe addition to it and said, you know what, it's not just about thinking long-term, but also thinking of implementation. How then do we ensure that all that we are putting in place are implemented? Jeremy Atambo, Eugene Kwizera, and Maria, we've been talking about all these issues. Are you ready to hear the place of the African politician in this whole conversation? But have you ever heard your leader talk about climate change? Imagine if matters of climate change were in BBI. Would you have voted for it, Eugene Kwizera? Would you have campaigned for it? Just a yes or no?
No.
Imagine if they could just be doing those big rallies that they're doing across the country, and when they step in Nakuru or when they're somewhere in Kisumu or in Kilifi, it is about our climate. Would you attend such rallies? Eugene?
Yeah, I would attend to, to make sure that's what they're actually talking about.
Right.
But
Maria Gitao, would you attend such?
Similar to Eugene, I would attend to hear, but also I'm one of those who judges based on actual work, not just speaking. So I'd actually want to see in the capacity they've had as leaders, what have they done so far, so that I can believe they are really going to do something in the future.
Okay, great, Jeremy Atambo. And by the way, you should also remember, this is the country where one day a politician stood on a podium and said, "Why are you telling us not to cut trees? The rain comes from heaven, not from trees." A whole politician right now occupying a very big position in this country. Interesting. Jeremy Atambo.
I'll just reiterate with a big no. Empty promises cannot take us anywhere, Opondo, and actions definitely do speak louder than words. So thank you so much.
Are you looking forward for the debate tomorrow?
Most definitely. Yes, I am.
Thank you. Great. It has been quite a long conversation. Eugene, asante sana for joining us all the way from Kigali in Rwanda, African Leadership University. Maria representing Kenya Safi and Strathmore University. The same time I saw your leader was in the chat box here, but she left. Jeremy Atambo from Daystar University, asanteni sana. It has been quite an insightful conversation. And tomorrow is the day, and we have to finish this one with a bang, guys. Tell a friend, to tell a friend, to tell another friend, to invite another one, that tomorrow is a very great day. We have, because you see, we talked about climate communication, we talked about food security, we talked about today, climate change and energy. But there's one issue that keeps on coming back: the issue of policymakers, the issue of politics, the issue of governance. And sometimes we are saying there are things we can't do alone. We need the politicians, we need the leaders into this space. That is what we are talking about tomorrow. And the first question tomorrow, if maybe just to throw it to all of you and go sleep thinking about it, have you ever had an African politician talk about climate change in any of his or her speeches? And if you ever hear of that, will that make you start looking at that politician differently from the others? It has been quite a great debate. Thank you to everyone who made it possible. Climate Story Lab, we are very grateful. Camp D Voices, and to the whole team working behind to make sure that this is happening. Let me just today recognize them by their names because you may never see them, but they make this happen. Wanja is there. I know, really watching and happy and proud of you all debaters. Cindy is there, also watching and happy to be part of this conversation. Alex, Ken, Derek, and Victor Wangui, and Liz, who was not able to join us because of power and the energy that we're talking about today. All those who are watching from home, wherever you are, Santini Sana, you have yourselves a good night. See you tomorrow.
Thank you so much. Have a good night, everyone.
Good night.
Thank you and good night.